Hey class, today I just wanted to do a little bit of a review of two-step equations. I know we've talked about this for a while, but it's always good to get a little bit of a refresher, right? So when we're talking about two-step equations, we're always looking to isolate. Another way to think about isolating is how can I get my variable to be all by itself? How do we do that? Well, we do inverse operations. We're doing the opposite of what the equation is telling us to do. And when you're doing your inverse operations, just make sure you do them on both sides of the equation. You don't want it to be unbalanced. Whatever you do on the left side, you're going to do on the right side. So let's get into some examples. I'm looking at the equation 4x minus 1 is equal to 11. So my first step, let me check to see if my equation or my variable is isolated. So I like putting a little box around it. And it's not. Right? I've got this times 4 next to it. I've got this minus 1 attached. So I'm going to start doing inverse operations. I'm going to first do the inverse of minus 1, which is plus 1. Remember, if I'm doing an inverse operation, I have to make sure I'm doing it on the other side of the equal sign as well. Minus 1 plus 1 turns into a 0, and I can cross it out, which is great. Everything that I didn't work with is going to come back down, so that 4x comes right back down. It's going to be equal to, and on the right-hand side, I'm left with 11 plus 1 is 12. Let's check, did I isolate my variable? No, there's still a 4 next to it. So I'm going to do the opposite of multiply, which would be to divide. And when I do 4 divided by 4, it makes a 1, so I can cross it out. But again, make sure you're doing the same exact thing on the other side. And you can see finally we isolated our variable and we're left with x is equal to 3. So I checked if it was isolated, I did my inverse operations on both sides, and I got x is equal to 3. Sometimes you're going to find equations that have negative signs. The variable doesn't come first. You could see some with fractions, decimals, whatever. The steps are still the same. So in this case, I'm going to check to see if I'm isolating. And it's not, right? If it was isolated, x would be all by itself, but it's not. I've got a 3, I've got this minus 10. That's weird. So I'm going to start doing my inverse operations. Just something to keep in mind, I see this minus sign. That's attached to the 10x. So that's just something we got to watch out for, which means my first step, if I want this 3 to go away because it's a positive 3, well, let's subtract 3 because I know 3 minus 3 makes a 0. Great. Watch out. Make sure you're doing it to both sides of the equal sign. Everything in my box is going to come back down. I've got negative 10x is equal to negative 17 minus 3, which is negative 20. Did I isolate? No. I still have this negative 10 in the way, so let's get rid of that guy. When they're right next to each other, that means multiply, so the opposite in this case would be to divide. And I know negative 10 divided by negative 10 is 1, and 1 times x is just x. So I finally got x to be all by itself. But remember, you got to do your inverse operations on both sides. So I get my final answer of 2. Great. So I did my steps, right? I isolated, I did my inverse operations, and I think I know what the answers are. If you guys are ever stuck, you can use your calculator to check your work. So you'll see on my screen, I've got Desmos pulled up right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see if 2 is actually the answer to this question. So I'm going to take the left side of the equation, the part that has the variable. I'm going to type that into Desmos, 3 minus 10. And if you hit this ABC button, it opens up the variable so you can type that in. Great. So that was step 1. I hit my big blue button so I can get a new line. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to tell it what x is equal to. X is equal to, I think it's 2. So I'm going to plug in that x is equal to 2, and you'll notice, it gave me negative 17. Didn't I want it to be negative 17 over here? That means I got it right. Let's just double check that first one to see if we did that one right too. So 4x minus 1 equals 11. I think the answer is 3. So I can check, right? I can type in that part of the equation with the x. So 4x minus 1. Hit the big blue button. Now I'm going to type in what x is actually equal to. I think x in this case is equal to 3. So when I type in that x is equal to 3, my calculator tells me, hey, all that stuff you typed in earlier is equal to 11, which is exactly what I wanted. So you can always use your calculator to check to see if you're right. Thanks.